Laura and Bet entered the airport building. They made their way among the many suitcases and people moving in different directions. It was especially difficult to get through the large groups of people blocking their way. Betty walked behind her, wheeling her huge black suitcase. She muttered to herself grudgingly about her fatigue and reluctance to fly anywhere and how her mother never listened to her. Suddenly, Laura stopped and turned around to her daughter because she suddenly bumped into her suitcase. I know why you don't want to fly. It's not because of me or your fatigue at all. You don't want to go because of Jim. But didn't we plan this trip in advance? He loves you, so he can wait, and he won't have to wait long. We'll be back in 10 days. I have the right to rest at least once a year. Or do you think I have to work all the time with no days off? In the same breath, Laura told her daughter everything she had been thinking about all morning. You could have no problem going alone. You could have rested like you dreamed, but I would rather have stayed home. I'm fine at home, and you're always picking on me, Betty grumbled. We already talked about it. I don't want to start over. I'm not going to go through all 10 days. We're flying together. Let's go. Laura said as she walked past the check in desks. On the electronic board, they saw the name of their flight and realized that check in had not yet begun. Well, now we're going to be stuck here for an hour, muttered Bet. It's okay. We'll just sit around. We'll go to Starbucks for coffee. You know I don't like being late. Laura tried to contain her irritation. I wish we were too late, Betty muttered to herself. Why are you doing this to me? Laura asked. I just want to go home. You know I love the sea, but right now I feel like going home. It's a lot of people. It's all very pressing. I want to run away, Betty answered and immersed herself in her phone. Laura didn't like the hustle and bustle either, but unfortunately, she couldn't do without it at train stations and airports. She felt very tired, and somewhere deep in her heart, she also felt a desire to wrap up in her favorite blanket on her favorite couch away from all these people. But she banished these thoughts. They would soon be able to enjoy the sun and take a quiet walk along the quay. They were only a few hours away from a vacation. Laura imagined herself in a new, light dress with a tan that covered her skin. Then she imagined herself in a swimsuit on the beach. These images in her head gave her strength. She had always been attractive, but it had been so long since she had an excuse to dress up and let her hair down. She noticed two empty seats in a row of chairs connected to each other. She headed toward them, hurrying to make sure no one took them first. Beth followed, keeping her eyes on the phone screen. Yes, we arrived a little early, but that's okay. The important thing is that we are already here, and no amount of traffic will keep us from leaving, Laura said. She sat down in her seat and put her suitcases to the side and stretched out her tired legs. Through the huge windows, you could see the October sky, draped in gray clouds, ready to spew rain, snow, or both at any moment. Mom, I'm going to the toilet. I won't be long, my daughter said without waiting for an answer. All right, but not for long. I don't want to run around looking for you, Laura shouted, but her daughter was already moving away without looking back. What a stubborn age, all hedgehog like, with all the needles pointed at me. She'll be happy at sea later, but now she's wearing out my nerves with her protest, Laura thought. Suddenly, she noticed a man with a bag on his shoulder and his coat unbuttoned. His unshaven chin made him look tired, but his clear, lively eyes were fixed on her. She turned away and looked out the window, where a plane had just taken off and was gaining altitude. The man walked past and sat in the empty seat across from Laura. She was surprised that it was empty and didn't notice when the people who were sitting next to her managed to leave. The man placed the bag on his lap and also watched the plane take off. "Are you waiting for flight 427?" he asked Laura. "Yeah, I didn't want to talk to the stranger, but it would have been impolite to remain silent. Nothing much, just asking. I see that not too many people are flying on this flight today," the man replied, shrugging his shoulders. "Are you on the flight too?" Laura asked. "Do you fly this flight often?" The man perked up and turned slightly in her direction. "Not very often, but I fly a lot. And on this flight, too. Convenient time and inexpensive. But there's a big difference when there are a lot of people flying or when there are very few, and the flight is even cancelled because of that," he explained. Laura became alarmed and looked around the room. "There is a difference. A light airplane would be blown away by the wind," Beth remarked skeptically, sitting down next to her mother and pulling her cell phone out of her jacket pocket. Laura was relieved to have her daughter back and relaxed. "There was some truth in what your daughter said," the man continued. There was a strange combination of irony and sadness in his gaze. He stood out from the crowd, as if he were aiming at someone and watching him. "What part of it is true?" Beth immediately responded with interest. It's not easy to distract a teenager from a phone screen, but this mysterious man succeeded. "Please explain your point," Laura said, maintaining her daughter's interest. Betty waited for the sequel and looked at the man curiously. His quiet and pleasant voice was trustworthy and appealing. The man began his story by saying that he had long noticed that the number of passengers on a train or an airplane was directly related to the risk of disaster. If a plane is less than 55% full of passengers, it runs a significant risk of not flying, unlike a plane fully occupied with passengers. In addition, if there is a large percentage of passengers who cancel the flight at the last moment due to some circumstances, then the likelihood of a disaster is greatly increased. He went on to confirm his conjectures with facts, telling of a researcher who had drawn the same conclusions after analyzing many unsuccessful flights that ended in various mishaps, from minor breakdowns and minor inconveniences for passengers to the most widespread disasters. "Why so?" Beth questioned, but the man offered no more objective explanation. The man's gaze grew even sadder, the corners of his lips drooping. "So people have a premonition of disaster and refuse to fly," Beth clarified, shifting her gaze to her mother. "You see, and you're not listening to me. It's quite possible because there's a lot of evidence like that," the man said. "A man is in a hurry, afraid of being late, but suddenly there is an obstacle in his way, a traffic jam on the road, or he slips, falls, and breaks his leg, and he thinks he is the most unhappy because he missed his flight. And suddenly he learns on the news that the plane he didn't get on crashed and all the passengers died. Then he realizes that he was incredibly lucky. He got away with a broken leg, but he's alive. That's the kind of luck." "Accident?" The young girl joined in the discussion with interest. "An accident isn't an accident. It's more of a conduction. Someone decided that this person was too young to die and sent an obstacle or a guardian angel," Beth said thoughtfully. "There was definitely something or someone higher up involved." The man continued. "In mathematics, there are various theories that allow us to calculate quite accurately the probability of some event among the possible variants and the frequency. Unfortunately, it has not occurred to anyone to connect these two processes, the luck of a particular person and the mathematical probability of a catastrophe." "Are you a mathematician?" guessed Betty. "And what does a person's luck depend on?" Beth was already listening so intently that she hid her phone in her jacket. "Oh, that's not for me. I'm a lover of the exact sciences. They put luck in the category of mysticism, or, if you like, Psychology. Have you ever noticed that a calm and optimistic person seems lucky? Everything goes well with him in any scenario. And those who mope and grumble see everything as bad, get into trouble more often. At these words, Laura looked intently at her daughter, but the latter did not notice the gaze turned to her. Beth was very much in her own thoughts. I'm sure that if we connect these two factors, the personality of a particular person and the mathematical probability of an event, and do the necessary calculations, we will find a close relationship between them. But I don't think it occurred to anyone to do that, the man continued. According to you, if losers don't fly, planes won't fall? Laughed Beth. It's not that simple. There are still reasons for plane crashes, and they shouldn't be ignored, the man said very seriously. It was as if they were talking to a Nobel laureate. Yes, and a person's mood is a fragile thing. It depends on many factors, and can be anything at any given moment, he pondered aloud. Are you saying that if the plane isn't at least half full, it's better to refuse to fly it? Beth interrupted him. Maybe we should just cancel such flights? There is a reasonable grain in your reasoning, but if an event is already planned by an unknown will, it will happen anyway. The key here is not the flight number, but the people who are gathered on board. Believe me, there are many reasons for this, and we can talk about this for a very long time. Is it like the movie Destination? Asked Beth. Is it punishment, or will Providence catch up with a particular person anyway? If you think further on this subject, it seems that at birth a person is set his fate, a known date, place, and situation in which he will end his earthly journey. If he is destined to drown in the sea, he will not fall with the plane. Beth's reasoning was beginning to frighten Laura. Unless the plane falls into the sea. The corners of the man's lips lifted up slightly. So what? You can't change anything? Beth asked, frightened. No, why, I think you can. But you have to sacrifice something, change something, usually in yourself, the man replied. Christianity explains it pretty well, he continued. So nothing bad will happen to a believing person, Beth concluded. I wouldn't jump to such a categorical conclusion because check-in begins for Flight 427, repeated several times a pleasant female voice on the airport intercom. You and we are crazy together. Why did we listen to your nonsense about disasters? Laura remarked rather sharply. She looked at her daughter and stood up. Laura picked up her suitcase and hung her bag on her shoulder. She was perplexed as to how to proceed and why she had let this whole conversation take place. Will you fly with us? Beth asked the man hopefully, seeing that he wasn't going to check in. At that moment, a 5-year-old boy ran past them shouting, I don't want to get on the plane. The parents ran after him, but the boy dodged oncoming people and luggage. The parents fell behind, bumping into other people. The boy also feels that it is not worth taking this flight if parents had listened to him. They could have avoided a tragedy, the man stated with sadness in his voice and stood up, too. The boy senses trouble. Beth shifted her gaze from her mother to the man, frightened. It's quite likely that children don't turn on reason as adults do. They go with their feelings. I guess I'll fly tomorrow. He adjusted his bag on his shoulder. And good luck to you if you decide to fly. The man went to the exit in the direction where the boy had just run away. Mom, what about us? The girl looked pleadingly at her mother. Betty, did you really believe that lunatic said? The tickets will be gone. No one will pay us back for them. Judging by the news, full planes are going down too. We shouldn't think about that before we fly. Let's go. Laura walked resolutely to the check-in counter. Mom! Beth called out to her mother, and she didn't move from her seat. Well, what else? Laura muttered tiredly. Why can't you hear me? Maybe my intuition tells me not to fly. Beth muttered, a little frightened. Your intuition tells you that Jim stayed in town, and so does your friend Linda, who keeps trying to flirt with Jim. And you're afraid they might start dating. Beth bit her lip in resentment, her eyes glistening. Her phone in her jacket pocket beeped, and she pulled out her cell phone and read the message. Have a safe flight. Call me when you get there. I'm worried, she read. Well, he's worried too. What kind of day is this? Betty stomped her foot in frustration. Check in for the flight, the voice repeated from the speaker. Let's go. Laura took her daughter's hand and led her to the counter. The girl in the uniform held out her hand for the papers, but Laura was no hurry to give them back. She looked back. There were only a few people behind her. It was like everything around her wasn't real. It was like being in slow motion. Her hand trembled slightly, and so did her knees. She used to think it was from fatigue, but she wasn't so sure anymore. Are you flying or not? Impatiently asked the girl behind the counter. Yes. I mean, no. Laura turned around and hurriedly walked toward the exit. Sir, wait! Do you seriously think something could happen? Gasping, she asked the man. I told you everything. You're right to believe me or not. I've made my choice. Now it's your turn. Will you test the theory? He adjusted his bag and went on his way. Mom, let's go home. Her daughter tugged at her sleeve as she approached. And the money, Laura said less confidently. Life is more precious, and we'll go to the tanning salon tomorrow. Beth noticed the doubt in her mother's eyes, smiled, and took the bag from her hand. Now Laura was running after her daughter and grumbled. Where are you rushing off to? I can't keep up with you. They exited the airport building and walked to a cab. The man was already standing there. I see you're coming home. Really? He asked. You still have time to get back to check-in and fly to rest? No way. Why the hell did you sit next to me and talk about disasters? I didn't ask you to do that. There was no one else to intimidate. Why us? Began Laura's indignation. I trust my intuition, which in such cases tells me exactly who to start such a conversation with. Take it any way you want, the man said as he got into a cab. Laura looked out the car window and thought she wasn't upset at all, if only just a little bit. Betty was typing something into her mobile phone. At home, Laura unpacked her suitcase, looked at the new dress and swimsuit, and, with a sigh, tossed them away into the closet. It was a shame about the money she spent, but thank Lord she could afford it. Mama, I'm going for a walk. Betty's eyes brightened. Just not for long, you hear? Enough excitement for today. Laura replied in agreement. She sat down to the TV with a cup of strong, hot coffee. The news was nearing the end, and she was about to change the channel when the announcer announced that today the plane on flight 427 to Istanbul had one engine on fire, the landing gear had not opened, and there was a fire in the cabin. When it made a hard landing, there were casualties. There was more scary footage. Laura clutched at her heart. God, thank God we're home. For their summer vacation, Laura and Beth decided to take the train. After all, accidents on the railroad are less likely to happen. The cars are always packed with vacationers. Maybe this man was a guardian angel, or maybe he was just sent by an angel to share his observations with us at that moment. What was he saying? That he needed to change something about himself. Something to think about. Our angels are always with us, and often they use someone else's mouth to tell us something. Many people believe that angels are like ordinary people who walk among us. They have all come into your life with a specific mission. The only question is whether you believe that and whether or not you can realize what it was given to you for. Some people get the meaning of such conversations right away. Others are a little stubborn and they realize everything a little later.